Welcome to podcast number 3, and for this one we've decided we're going to have a discussion about an encounter we had a few nights ago.
I found myself standing in the kitchen thinking that it had been raining again, and it hadn't rained at all. That was the interesting thing, but generally that then leads to me wondering why I'm actually standing up. So in the morning, I realised that I now had some information in regards to a lot of questions that had been asked. The Zetas had stated that they exist in a vibrational elevated time frame, that it's about 10 times faster than the human time frame. So basically now that they had given us a comparison between the difference of the human time frame and their own time frame. They were talking about when the craft entered our atmosphere, that they apply a compression to their frequency, and in that way they're actually able to materialise in front of our physical spaces. They also said that when compression is not applied, the craft cannot be seen. This explains a lot about how they travel. It also explains why there's no sonic boom when they move from one place to another and are seen miles and miles away half a second later. I initially thought that it was all about light frequency and the inability of humans to be able to view something outside of the scope of the light or the structure of light waves. But now, of course, they're saying that this is to do with what's called the human time frame, or the HTF. So they're saying that when craft are seen darting from one location to another, they're moving in and out of the HTF. And so it seems as though they are travelling at incredible speeds within the atmosphere, but actually they're not. They're just moving in and out of different time frames. This explains a lot, especially when a human is taken on board a craft. Often a person will be gone for half an hour or an hour, but everybody will say, well, you've been gone for hours. They may also present with a beard or a 5 o'clock shadow on their face, but they've only been gone half an hour and they shaved. This also explains a lot of things about contact that we don't understand, and one of them is when we are awoken at night or moved onto a craft, that sometimes a lot of people black out as they're moved onto craft, and that's probably because of the difference between the HTF and the human time frame, and their time frame is different. And so because of the difference, then to board a craft, you've got to navigate the difference between the time frames. The beings are saying that there's a compression in place. Now, initially I thought the compression was based around compressed electrons, but now that they're talking about, in a theoretical sense, we all know that time doesn't actually exist, but from their perspective, they're trying to give some type of understanding between the different frequencies, so the human frequencies and their frequencies. And so when a human enters the craft, they generally are blacked out or blacking out, and then they move into that space where they're then talked with, spoken with, procedures are performed. They then come back and they've only been gone half an hour or an hour. And this also explains the lost time phenomenon. Somebody's driving along, they look at their watch and they've lost 2 hours, but they weren't perceivably taken out of a vehicle. But they actually were taken out, put back in within a couple of seconds, but of course they were gone for hours. And this is all to do with the principles of HTF.
And so that would explain the craft moving so fast in the sky. It's not that they're moving fast, although I'm sure they are moving fast, It's that time difference.
Yeah, so the way that we perceive things around us is via time. We look outside, we see trees, we see the wind moving. We're in a specific time frame, a specific frequency. But the reason that we can't see photons that make up the light outside is because, one, that we have an inability to see them unless we use some sort of a prismatic process. And also the photons themselves that make up the light span are also at a different wavelength. Now, this is all that's happening with the craft, is that they're actually operating on a different wavelength. And for them to be seen physically, they need to be compressing their, whatever you would call it, the time frame process to be seen physically inside this time frame. And I don't believe that it's actually all about, the ticking of a clock and, specific time frames. I believe that they've given us this information as a comparison to understand the difference between vibration. And what it also does is shows us that these are not interdimensional or non-corporeal beings, but actually physical beings that are living physically, but they're able to travel in ways that look like they are super advanced. When humans are visited on planet bi races, they're able to see distortions. This appears in distortions that are seen in the room. A person may intuitively sense a fear-based response to an extraterrestrial being in a room. And this is to do with the frequency difference between the human cellular structure, which is operating at 1 HTF, and the race's physical structure that exists in the different time frame. The human body has zero capacity to understand the change in frequency at a cellular level, and it may then present itself as a being burnt, as a human being burnt. It can also present in your emotional body as fear, but in your physical body it can present as water running out of your eyes. And so sometimes when people are being contacted, they'll have water running out of their eyes as it's happening, as though they were crying, but they're actually not crying. This is a physical response to the frequency of beings that are visiting humans.
Now I'm just casting my mind back to various other bits and bobs that we've been told. And one of those was about why humans got burnt and experienced unwellness after they approached crafts. And we were told that was because of the frequency the craft is holding, that the craft is holding its own space, its own, I can't remember the exact words that they used, but its own space, its own frequency. So that would absolutely make sense in terms of what you've just spoken about.
Well, it's like when you cook something in the microwave. You can't see the waves that are heating the food up or moving the molecules, but the thing is that they are vibrating. And so when you walk near a craft, they start to interact with your physical cellular structure, and then your skin then presents as being burnt because it's been irradiated by the craft. This, what they've talked about with the human time frame, now starts to explain a lot of things that have been going on.
Yeah, it does. And I've sort of thinking back on my own experiences when I've had contact with them, and I've had what seems like hours worth of time spent with them in in just a few minutes, and it's extremely disorientating when you come back to your normal self and you actually recall a lot of what's happened. But that would totally make sense.
Well, if you want some more mind-bending concepts, think about the ones where people have met on board craft, but they are actually different ages, but when they're meeting on the craft, they're the same age. So they've been pulled out of one part of the time stream. The time stream's then compressed. They then move to the next part of the time stream. that's also compressed, and then they're able to create a synchronous time frequency for two people on individual timelines to be in the same space at the same time. I would suggest that that's fairly advanced technologies. I mean, I haven't heard of anything here about that. Another thing about the human time frame theory here is it explains some things about healing and how races can utilise the etheric body of a human being. Since the vibrational rate of the race is different ratio than the human form, they easily interact with the etheric form of humans and either can implant technologies that can't be seen, or they interact with the etheric body in what is considered to be a contact situation. And this is why when some people are being visited or abducted even by the Greys, that they are perceiving themselves to be moved out of their physical bodies but having an astral experience. Because we know that the astral person that does astraling has moved into a state where they're able to separate from their physical form. And this process that causes these two things to exist, the consciousness within the physical form in the astral, is because they're both at the same frequency. But once the person's consciousness has moved to a different state, the consciousness is able to separate itself from the physical form. And so in some respects, the races are already using techniques that humans are using to astral travel. Because when you astral, you're actually changing your time frame to be able to move out of your body. The other point that I want to make here is that when they come and contact people, if they do it from within their own time frame, which means that theoretically it's 10 times faster, that they're able to interact with people etherically and not cause them any physical damage because they're only operating with something that's already at a much higher frequency anyway.
And that is the way the Zetas prefer to work, isn't it? They've said that if there is a choice in how they can work with a human, if they can work on an etheric level, that they will do that. Although there are certain procedures they need the physical body of the human to be present, it's far less common for them to perform a physical procedure on somebody these days, which is obviously not how it was 60, 70 years ago.
I would suggest that a lot of people have been experiencing contact via the astral realms. Of course, the astral realms, they are a collection of all human thoughts. And so when you're dreaming in a dream state, you may be interacting in an astral frequency with something that's already taken place to another human and thus be living that experience yourself. But with this HTF theory, what it does is it allows us to start to understand that these people may have actually been taken or contacted, and in doing so, they're being contacted with etherically and not physically at all. Now, we all know that the etheric body is a mirror image of the physical body, and anything that happens in the etheric body then is replicated into the physical form. And so if they perform a procedure on the etheric body, which is energetic, it may be that then the physical wound appears on the physical body as well. This also explains why some people have specific tags or marks on them. There is a mark that's been seen occasionally on the internet that's a round circle with a cross in the middle. Some beings are supposedly using that as a marking mechanism on the skin, but they're probably doing that to the etheric form, and it's automatically appearing on the physical form. But it's been a great conversation, and I think the questions have been very interesting today.
So you've blogged about this download of information that you received from the Zetas a couple of nights ago. and that blog date is the 13th of January if people want to go to the blog and they can read through what we've just talked about.